Hello, BookTube. We're continuing on with my 7.2 Q&A, and we're up to William Fett. What is your opinion of Washington Irving and your favorite piece of writing by him? I think he's great. I love Washington Irving. And my favorite piece of writing by him, rather predictably, is nonfiction, and not only nonfiction, but a long biography, his biography of Christopher Columbus. I love his biography of Washington. So I like his nonfiction more than I like his fiction. But you're never gonna, unless it's on Project Gutenberg or something. There's never gonna be just a big, fun, annotated paperback reprint of his Life of Washington, even an abridgment, which is a shame. But anyway, let's see here. REPS says, "Who are your favorite Mexican authors, and do you like James Ellroy's novels?" I love James Ellroy's novels, and my favorite Mexican author is Daniel Saldana Paris. RTLLTR says, "Thoughts on Jack London and your favorite book of his, if you have one." I like Jack London just fine. My favorite book of his is The Sea Wolf. Not any of the books of his about dogs. Not any of them. Little April says, "Are syllabi fun to make?" Kinda, yeah. Thoughts on Shakespeare's narrative poems, are they underappreciated? There's nothing about Shakespeare that's underappreciated. The narrative poems are underread, certainly by the general public, but not underappreciated. There have been 1,000 books about each one of them. But I like them just fine. They very much set Shakespeare in his time. There's nothing in the narrative poems that does what a lot of the plays do, which is transcend time and reach out right to you. Amy 1649 or Ivan's Nightmare. Once again, I stress that my services in titling books extends to titling YouTube channels and is available 24 hours a day, free of charge. Yes, is it better to have read under a yak and lost, or better never to have yacked at all? Referring to those of you who are new to the channel, have no idea what that's talking to. I mentioned that one time a question was asked, what is the weirdest place I've ever read? And I have read underneath a yak, underneath the long fur of a yak when it was snowing. And underneath a yak turns out to be a very hospitable place to be. I don't know about reading underneath a yak, but I would strongly urge one of you, as many of you as can, or are interested to meet one. They're interesting people. Anthony Suppa says, let's see here. "I would like to know if you are a fan of George Gershwin's music and the rest of Tin Pan Alley." I am, yes. Jack Tarr says, "I need to get a present for a relative who's a fan of the mystery suspense genres, but my knowledge of those genres begins and ends with authors that probably read to death. Can you recommend a mystery that she's unlikely to have read that can stand toe-to-toe with the titans of the genre?" Georgette Heyer. I don't know if I have any of hers right here, but she's famous for her Regency romances, but she writes really good murder mysteries as well. Catherine Aird, Margaret Allingham. If you type in Golden Age Mystery, you'll get a lot of authors. I bet that your relative hasn't read them all. Catherine Aird I like quite a bit, and I'm sure you can find her books. And as usual, if you can't, let me know, and I will find them for you. M has a few questions. Number one, thoughts on this year's Women's Prize for Fiction long list or short list? I've been slowly working my way through it and rather underwhelmed by a lot of the choices. I agree, I was underwhelmed. Question number two, do you like Nabokov's Lolita? Is it worth reading? I do not like it. I think it's junk. Probably you're at some point going to have to read it. But in my opinion, you're just as well served to read about it as to read it, because your reading time is very precious. Question number three, do you know any books that would appeal to someone who has been engrossed in Dude Bro Lit for years? Deprogramming Dude Bro Lit fans is delicate. It's a very delicate process. It has to be handled right or they'll rebel. Because they think, you have to keep in mind with Dude Bro Lit fans, they think they're reading, but they're not really reading. It's not really reading. What they are doing is just getting off on a pleasure button. They are just playing video games. It's a book. So the self-image of someone who loves books is often very important to people who have weak self-images. And Dude Bro Lit fans always have weak self-images. So what you want to do is, it's very, very delicate. I wouldn't be able to prescribe unless I knew the specifics, because you don't want to botch it. If you botch it, you'll lose them forever. I have successfully deprogrammed Dude Bro Lit fans. The key is to look at the spectrum of literature that walks right up to the door of Dude Bro Lit And what you want to do is get them to follow a breadcrumb trail away from what they are paging through and jonesing for, towards the light, towards stuff that what you want to do is for those initial first few books leading them away to be so similar to Dude Bro Lit that they don't notice the difference. Because Dude Bro Lit aficionados do not want to concentrate. They do not want to settle down and settle in with a book. They go nuts. They just go literally spastically bounce off the walls when you ask them to do that. So you can't just tell them to do that right away. You have to lead them away from this thing that has totally eroded their ability to be a reader. I could do specifics, but I can't do a general any more than that. And question number 4, an Albanian friend of mine recently gave me several books of Ismail Kadari, and I found them very interesting. He's very good. What other books from that part of Europe would you recommend in translation? I don't know enough to recommend anybody. I recommend him very much so. I've read everything by him. Let's see here. Tomorrow's Classic says, let's see here. Question number 1. After seeing 1917 last year, wasn't it good? Didn't you like it? Wasn't I right? I got a screener of a movie called 1917. I said, boy, oh boy, is it entertaining to watch. And a lot of people have said, you were right. Good, you're right about books, you're right about movies too. And when it comes to movies, if you want a thriller, oh boy. I got an electronic screener for a thriller. I don't know if it's out. I don't know if it's coming out. I don't know if it's going to be in movie theaters. I think movie theaters are dying. But it stars Gerard Butler, and it's called Greenland. And it's about a comet striking the Earth and what happens. Oh my, was it good? Oh my. Deserves to be another one, that spate of asteroid movies that came out about 15, 20 years ago that they're all really good, and they've all had an active life on DVD and reprints and whatnot. Greenland deserves to be one of those. I don't know if that's going to happen in today's movie theater world, but it deserves to be. It's terrific. But anyway, you had a question at some point along the line. Do you have a recommendation for a good single-volume general history of World War I? Yeah, A World Undone by C.J. Meyer, or G.J. Meyer. A World Undone is a terrific one-volume history of World War I. Question number 2, what are your politics? Yeah, there we go again. Trolls I've seen in the comments label you a leftist, whatever that means these days. I hesitate to talk about my personal politics on this channel. Trust me, you do not know what they are, and I, to put it mildly, am not a leftist. Question number 3, my brother, despite the fact that we both live in the UK, defends Trump. And I have noticed him spouting a lot of right-wing talking points and conspiracies. Well, yeah, you won't find one without the other. You won't find someone spouting right-wing talking points in 2020 who does not immediately also talk about George Soros and Hillary Clinton, because there is no such thing anymore as a legitimate conservative Republican wing of American politics. Instead, there's the spectrum of the Democratic wing, and then utter racist crackpottery. And no one is more grieved about that than I am. But yeah, they go hand in hand. You'll never hear someone talking about Republican talking points today, especially if they're a Trump fan, who doesn't also talk about the fact that everyone is lying to you who says that anything that they're saying isn't true. Is there a subtle way to pull him back to reality? I don't want to fight him, but these conspiracies are so blatantly untrue, it frustrates me. Well, you asked for a subtle way, and there isn't really a subtle way, because you're talking about someone, I know this is very explosive language, but it is literally true. You're talking about someone who has been brainwashed. You're talking about someone who's been programmed for a cult. And cult deprogramming is a very specialized thing, very nuanced and delicate, that is to be left in the hands of professionals. Deprogramming, that is what we're talking about here. Deprogramming someone from a cult just as a lay civilian who doesn't have any idea what you're doing, you could make things worse. One approach that has been shown to work to start the process is to stop the feed. These people are constantly going back to the same feed, the same dopamine feed of things that are re-upping their outrage, re-upping their sense of being an aggrieved minority, re-upping their sense that it's only a handful of people who are telling me the truth about how the world really is, and everybody else are sheeple who are believing that George Soros doesn't run the world, when we all know he really does. And the thing is, they didn't start that way. Obviously, your brother became radicalized by by accessing that feed. One way that tends to work to slowly lower the temperature is to stop that feed. No more Twitter. No, find out where that feed is coming from and stop it. But with another free individual, you often can't do that. In your situation, I have known people in the last 3 years. This is just a tiny example of the gigantic damage this one racist, sexist, fascist, lying moron is doing, not just politically or internationally, but personally. Tearing families apart. Literally tearing families apart. I have heard from many, many people in the last 4 years, many people saying, okay, I thought your outrage was overdone in 2016. You were saying, I told people during the 2016 presidential election, I said, this is not a choice between the lesser of two evils. This is a choice between a lesser evil and the literal end of America. And people thought I was just, being outrageous or alarmist or had Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah, come over here to Hyde Cottage, stand in front of me and tell me I'm deranged. Now, a lot of those people saying, okay, well, now I see that isn't true. He has cratered huge chunks of the American economy while constantly talking about how great it is. And one approach that I have seen, it's rather drastic. I don't advise it for your brother, because if it doesn't work, nothing else is going to work. But I have known people in the last 3 or 4 years who have taken the approach in a similar situation of going to the person in question and saying, you have been radicalized. You are a member of a cult. You are talking about hidden conspiracy theories, the deep state, QAnon, that don't exist. They aren't making any sense. And what I want to tell you is, speaking to you as your wife, your brother, your son, I am now telling you that you have to make a choice between that worldview, which on some level you know is wrong, or me. If this goes on any longer, I will sever all contact with you forever. So that 5 years from now, if you come to your senses, I won't be available. You can email me all you want. My answer will still be no. You have a choice to make now between me and this weird mania that has taken hold of you. You will either do that or you will have contact with me, but not both any longer. I don't advise that. And in a couple of the cases where people have presented that, the brainwashed person has said, who put you up to this? Just lost, completely lost. So my heart goes out to you. It is a very, very difficult situation to be in. I don't know what to say about confrontation or subtle means of deprogramming, except maybe to look at the feed. See if there's something you can do to cut off these people. Your brother is a normal person who has been radicalized. If you could stop his radicalization, he would slowly revert back to being normal. But I don't know what to tell you. Feel free to email me if you want to talk about it specifically. My email is on every video, not just to talk about books and writing and whatnot, but also for any of you to cry on my shoulder. I am here all the time. Anyway, let's see. Several Gecko says, I've been missing Poetry Tuesday. Yes, a feature that used to exist on this channel. I should get back to it. Have you made any strides in your modern poetry reading? I still read everything that I get, but I get a lot less of it now that I don't get books anymore. Do you think you'll get to a point where you have a top 10 in poetry in your end of the year list? No, I don't. Let's see. Elisa Cocciarelli, a well-known troublemaker, says, my question, you have acquired distaste for many authors from the second half of the 20th century. What are some writers from this period of time that you love? There's Evelyn Waugh, Mary McCarthy, Mira Spark, Anthony Burgess, Bohemian Hrabel, Catherine Mansfield, Joseph Heller, Flannery O'Connor, Eudora Welty. There are a whole bunch. That's just tip of the iceberg. There are a whole bunch that I can name. V.S. Pritchett, Louis Auchincloss. There's a whole bunch of people. Gore Vidal. It's just not the rogues gallery that you name. That's all. Gene Miller says, my two favorite science fiction novels are Andy Weir, I assume The Martian, and China Mieville, maybe Perdido Street Station. Would you name 2 or 3 others who are worthy of attention? Well, yes. I mean, yes. I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, The Martian and Andy and China Mieville are new authors. They're still young, physically young. I mean, there's Dune, obviously. There's tons and tons of of well-known canonical science fiction authors that are well worth your time. Absolutely. I mean, if you haven't read Dune, you should read Dune. If you haven't read Martian Chronicles, you should read the Martian Chronicles, and so on and so forth. I mean, you won't need me to list the books, but you're starting at the other end of the spectrum. You could go back to the beginning, read Alfred Bester, Cordwainer Smith, Fritz Leiber, all sorts of canonical Golden and Silver Age science fiction authors are well worth your time. Michael Jefferson says, why do you think The Grapes of Wrath is taught so frequently in schools when the majority of critics have only ever held his nonfiction in high regard? That's just plain wrong. I don't know, I admire your moxie, but that's just plain wrong. 95% of Steinbeck critics have held his fiction in very high regard and have not mentioned his nonfiction in the same breath. I don't know where you're getting that at all. Shouldn't we instead be reading Travels with Charlie or Acts of King Arthur? Acts of King Arthur is fiction. And Travels with Charlie is nonfiction, but it's a minor work. In the Steinbeck oeuvre, it's a minor work compared to Grapes of Wrath or, Of Mice and Men or something like that. So I'm not sure that I understand. I don't agree at all with the basic premises of these questions, and 95% of critics would not, or academics would not agree with it either. There is no consensus agreement that Steinbeck's nonfiction is better than his fiction, so the question sort of falls apart right there. Steve Watson says, I have enjoyed reading John Steinbeck's work. There's Steinbeck again. Where next? Well, that's not going to work. I'm going to need to know what you enjoyed about Steinbeck in order to point you in another direction. I mean, this is not the periodic table of elements. I'm going to need to know what you liked about Steinbeck in order to find out what you read next. And Steve Watson also asked, which historical figures would you like to see a new critical biography? I think it'd be nice if we had a nice big biography, a life and times, maybe letters of Fanny Trollope. It's a little dicey territory here, but President William Howard Taft. I know a lot of you will say, well, if you want a big book about him, why don't you write it yourself? But it has been a long time since the Pringles two-volume biography of Taft. It might be nice for another one. For all I know, there's one in the works that I don't know anything about. Or a great pope. It's been a good 30 or 40, maybe even 50 years since there was a biography of Pope John the 23rd. Those of you who are young, when the word great pope comes up, you might think Pope John Paul II. But oh boy, in the mid-20th century did we have a pope. John the 23rd deserves another biography. Nice big one. The last one was very good, but a nice big one would be nice. And he also asked, is the prequel a valid literary enterprise or just a money-making operation? Most cases that I've seen, they are not on their face very valid, but every once in a while there'll be one that's kind of sort of good. I don't generally approve. Most of the time it seems opportunistic to me. Then let's see here. Michelangelo Enthusiast says, sheesh, your little booktube channel is not so little anymore. And trust me, it's still very little. In terms of YouTube, it's still very little. I have 4 young friends who are professional YouTubers, and they shed and gain 3 times as many subscribers every day without even noticing it as I have or will ever have on this channel. So it's still little. My question, as the channel keeps growing, what will become of our emails? You have become a trusty shoulder for many of us to cry on, taking up roles as substitute parent, full-time parent, teacher, God, the pet dog, psychologist, and heck, if books and film recommendations count as a kind of medicine, you have even been a psychiatrist. I worry that as us Steve addicts have become a little too codependent and would have a hard time adjusting to a world without one-on-one Steve time. Why would that happen? The thought of sharing you with thousands more, you're okay, more as the months go on is daunting to us, to say the least. If I pay you, will you keep talking to me? I refuse to donate to your Patreon if you keep up this terrible habit of Googling worst laptops of the year 2009 and proceeding to buy exactly what comes up. How dare you? Is that a jab at the fact that I buy old laptops every day? Some of those old Chromebooks have worked wonders. I do a huge amount of work on them. How dare you? but in answer to what I get is the general question here. First of all, look around you. No fairy lights. No clever titling. No calls to action. Smash that like button. No editing. No music. No tinkling background sounds. No nothing. This channel is never going to be big. It's never going to be big. It's a miracle to me that any of you stick around as it is. I am mind-numbingly tedious. But let's indulge your hypothetical for a minute and say that this channel were somehow to explode in popularity. I don't think it's going to. All of those professional YouTube friends have said, well, number one, you got to stop making 5 videos a day. You're stepping on, that's the phrase, you're stepping on your own content. So you got to stop doing that. And, you know, you talk about books all the time, but every once in a while there's a controversy in the book world. Why don't you address those? Controversies are what gets you subscribers. And I say to them, I don't want subscribers. I don't want any more subscribers than I already have, because once this pandemic business is over, I'm going to go back into the business of mailing stuff to you people, and that gets expensive. It's expensive to feed all those little mouths out there. But let's indulge the hypothetical and say this channel got to 50,000 subscribers or something like that. It's never going to happen. Never going to happen. But if it did, that wouldn't affect emails. I am still a shoulder to cry on. I am still all these things you mentioned. I still want to hear from all of you. My email is on every video unless I forget to put it there, but it's on 1 million videos, so it's not hard to find. I still want to hear from all of you. And that's not going to change, so you don't have to worry about it. You're not going to have to worry about paying me to talk to me. I get a lot of emails in every day. I would ask you to just be aware of that, be forgiving of that. I get a huge number of emails every day. It goes up. The number goes up every day. And on top of that, let's not forget, I also work. I know I don't put pants on and go to a job, but I write all day long every day for money, for deadlines. So I don't always have the ability to turn right away to answering all of those emails. And also there's a learning curve on the other side as well. There are quite a few people who email me who don't understand email. They don't understand that email, like this channel, is a conversation. This is a conversation. I have absolutely no interest in being fact boy for you, Wikipedia boy for you in an email. So if you email me and say, you know, give me all the biological stats on the leaf-nosed bat of South America, you're not going to hear back from me. That's all. I'm going to put it in a folder and forget about it. I'm not going to get angry, but I'm not going to respond to a fact boy email that you could find out yourself. If you send me an email asking me, could you give me your extensively annotated critical thoughts on an entire literary movement? Thanks. I am going to put it in a folder and I'm going to forget about it because it's work, and you're not offering to pay me. What I want is conversation in email. If you send me an email and you ask me 4 different Steve Factboy questions, and instead of reading you the riot act, let's say I pick one of those questions and I write back a conversational response. Oh, here's something that I think about this thing, this question on the list that you sent me. And you write back and continue that conversation, you have learned your lesson. You have learned what I want email to be. If, as so many people do, you write back and say, so what about my other 3 questions? You probably won't hear from me again, because I'm not interested. I want conversation. I want what email is for you. That's what I'm a real person, same as you. So there's a learning curve on the other side as well, but you don't have to worry about that going anywhere. That's what I got into BookTube for. Is that kind of contact. So that's not going to go anywhere. And this insanity about this channel getting big is not going to happen. This channel is never going to reach 10,000 subscribers, much less 50,000. So I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. Andrew Russell asks, who stands out in your mind as a recent, within the last year or so, debut literary fiction author whose work you think will be worth keeping an eye on? If there's more than one, all the better. Well, I'm sure, yes, but they wouldn't work for a Q&A. I would direct you to my year-end list on Steve Reads, my literary blog, which is now housed on Open Letters Review. The backlists are available going back 30 years. And if you might not be able to find them on Open Letters, but you can always Google them. If you go to Google and type in Steve Donoghue debut fiction, you will get a list by year of the best debut fiction in all of those years. I stand by all of those books. And there'll be a wide variety for you to choose from, hundreds of titles by now, because I've been doing that best debut fiction of the year for many, many years, and we'll do it again this year. So there are lists that are, and they're all worth keeping an eye out on, and many of my predictions have prove them true. Keep in mind, when you look at a debut fiction list on Steve Reads from 2009 or 2002 or what, I didn't know the future. I was picking those 10 people as the most, and they weren't by any means the only debut novelists of that year. I picked them, and you will see that in many, many cases, I picked a winner. So that's what I do for a living. So I urge you to look at those lists. Let's see here. Errata says, if you could change anything about the way you were raised, what would it be? I'm not sure. I don't know I don't recognize the name Errata. I'm not sure if you're a new viewer to this channel or not. Those of you who are new to this channel, I was raised in an Irish Catholic family, but I was largely socialized by dogs. In terms of my personal background, well, I wouldn't change a whole lot of it, except that maybe I wouldn't have my father die quite so early. I mean, he died before I got to know him, which wasn't true for me Sainted Ma. Me Sainted Ma lived for a very long time, and for a long stretch of those later years, we were friends. Not just mother and son, but friends. And that was great. I would like the equivalent for my father, for a couple of my uncles, so a couple of aunts. I would like that to go longer. But in terms of the raising, nothing. I wouldn't change a thing. We're out of time. All right, we'll move on next time.